December 2016. That was the last time I've ever done a Mega Versus. That was nearly 4 years ago. But I brought it back to take the biggest look on Nickelodeon than anyone has done so far this year. I've covered modern SpongeBob, I've covered the Casa Grandes, I've covered Ollie's Pack, and I've even covered Its Pony. I've covered the whole 9 yards. And today, I will take you on an adventure and show you what Nickelodeon has been offering in 2020. I'd like to thank these people here for their kind words and support on other platforms. You guys are amazing, and this fan art here, which I think is super well made. Join the Panda Armada today, alphaj.show/panda, and pick your squad. Reddit, Instagram, Twitter, anywhere. I'm pushing out to all these other platforms for a big reason. So let's start off with what everyone knows, SpongeBob. I picked Jolly Lodgers because it is an episode that came out recently relative to your latest season, and one of the scenes in the show went viral. This episode is basically I'm your biggest fanatic and Krusty Towers if they had a baby scallop.
I'll take care of this!
The premise of this episode follows Squidward getting his home fumigated because of an urchin invasion.
It's an exterminator's fumigation tent. Somebody's been feeding sea urchins in this neighborhood, and they've infested my house!
Besides the fact that it has been documented to see SpongeBob alongside others be afraid of sea urchins, let's just throw out that episodic non-continuity but technically continuity window. I do enjoy the setup, being very minor in the way that it's presented, but shows the personality and dynamic between the two in a relatively non-harmful way. For once, cherish it. This is a SpongeBob and to a lesser extent Patrick annoys Squidward episode. Even though I feel like they don't do these episodes right anymore, I wanted to go into this episode as fair as possible, and overall, I don't think the annoyance of SpongeBob to Squidward was off in a way that I wasn't entertained by it, but I can totally see the point of those who do. Even though plenty of these episodes are coming up on their 20-year anniversary around there, Snowball Effect comes to mind as my go-to when explaining the dynamic of SpongeBob and Squidward done perfectly. And in that episode, Squidward doesn't want to be a part of the snowball fight between SpongeBob, and over time, through SpongeBob getting some of his own comeuppance via a snowball to the face, Squidward is now enjoying himself via vengeance from SpongeBob and Patrick messing with them all day. Idiot Box is another example of so. SpongeBob and Patrick mess with Squidward indirectly. He appears snobbish, but his curiosity leads into him having the most fun.
Do I really believe that if I sit here and pretend to drive a race car, that I'm suddenly gonna start hearing noises? What the?
Then in later seasons, you'd have episodes like Boating Buddies or Choir Boys, where the structure isn't. It's actually just Squidward being roped in on SpongeBob's mess and being beaten, thrown around, and whatnot for the sake of being Squidward, the character to do that with. It seems less fun in comparison, to me. Squidward ends up leaving to go to a hotel, in which the receptionist/manager is amazing, and apparently a lot of people on Twitter agree.
I'd like a room.
Well, lucky you. We have one room left, but I just gave it away.
Well, how does that make me lucky?
Because I just gave it to you.
Oh.
The mental gymnastics he places on Squidward are literally my aesthetic. A dad joke here, sleight of hand there, some sarcasm here, and you got yourself a great character even for the limited amount of screen time that he has. I also enjoy the fact that it's not a fish, but a shark.
Hey, that's my family you're talking about.
Making Bikini Bottom more varied in a sense that could really help to add to this new aesthetic/culture that post-sequel has been pushing for. I mean, if you're going to change some things fundamentally, it seems like the perfect time to start experimenting with other long-standing creative decisions. There's also a very, very well-placed piece of subtlety within the moment with the manager/receptionist. If you notice on the calendar, it shows a jellyfish. That's very well placed for the plot that's about to come. So Squidward relaxes on the bed and realizes that it's not a bed full of cotton and springs, but a bed full of hot coal and thus melts. And we get SpongeBob running through Squidward's room. I see he also has a key for this room. In fact, to have a hotel room that has other doors that leads into the rooms next to you, that is grounds for fighting that manager. I'd go downstairs and start slapboxing that shark. And I know what those suction cups can do, Squidward. I've been roaming around the What Could Go Wrong subreddit recently. You have the power of Gorilla Glue in your flippers. Flippers, right? That's the right word. Anyway, but yes, this is the ladder structure where it's just SpongeBob and Patrick messing with Squidward's day.
Don't you just love playing Hotel Slam and Run?
I enjoy it. Intellectual challenge.
All right. I know I heard something in here.
I used to do that when I was little, not invade people's homes, but just shout, "I know you're here," when home alone. You never know what's behind the couch or under the bed. That place is like the shadow realm until you're like 10, and then you worry about other places, like behind that large unmovable dresser or under the fridge. Yes, although they really lengthened this part of the episode by building up the anticipation of Squidward seeing the two, having his disappointment be immeasurable and his day ruined, he does find out and tries to lock them out of their rooms, despite only locking 2 of the 3 doors. Like you showed us in the scene that there's one more door, but less on the inconsistency. I love the comedic timing of when SpongeBob and Patrick tell Squidward about the jellyfishing convention. Only then does the banner fall down. If you didn't get the point that SpongeBob and Patrick are here to ruin Squidward's day, they have an extra montage about it. Whereas in It's Pony, a show I will review later on in this video obviously, I don't think the setups in these montages really warrant a rule of 3s matter. I feel like you get the fact that Squidward is going to be messed with by SpongeBob and Patrick, and thus, if you were to then fall on the fact that this is for comedic reasons, it's essentially just telling the same joke 3 more times, in addition to Squidward initially finding out. This setup is that Squidward is trying to relax and SpongeBob and Patrick keep ruining his time. But maybe if the variations could have a setup or a surprise to them, or some kind of humor that can come from Squidward's end, I think it would have made this a stronger episode. But now, we get to this scene, which I've seen on the Twitter feed, but I'll show you guys first. Squidward tries to get away from SpongeBob and Patrick like he's been doing for about 1 to 20 years, and this happens. Honestly, it just goes on and on with different outlandish expressions from Squidward, and because it goes on for a long time, you can't really ignore it within the episode. The animators must have had a great time coming up with different variations, but it doesn't do anything for me. Maybe if the scene wasn't as generic, albeit fundamental, as Squidward trying to get away from SpongeBob and Patrick, maybe there'd be something here, but it's just middling. It makes me want to watch other episodes, because this is just going to be one of those episodes of Squidward running around and screaming, trying to enjoy his life. And if that's your cup of tea, which it very well might be for a lot of people, considering that they keep making this episodic format, then hey, preferences, I suppose. It doesn't help the episode, however, that they saved the actual jellyfishing convention for around the last quarter of the episode, because that's the most interesting part. I could have done with less of the, wow, SpongeBob and Patrick also booked the same hotel as Squidward. Why not instead go directly from the scene with Squidward and the manager into directly the part where they scare Squidward in the hallway? You actually don't lose anything important. Would I dare say it's filler? Probably. The line of filler is so blurred that one man's filler is another man's treasure. But I do think focusing more on the jellyfishing convention and how Squidward is trapped there has the potential to be great. I mean, they were handed a great setup for a joke on a silver platter, or should I say blue plate.
Sir, all our plates are blue.
You have a caricature artist right there. There's plenty of room for comedy. You can have Squidward comment on the art, try to replace them, and make everyone's art very poorly. Squidward and art is pretty much a deep-rooted topic. And not only that, but considering that this takes from other episodes, like I'm Your Biggest Fanatic, you can really lean into those things. Granted, that makes this consistency look great, but other inconsistencies look even worse. But considering that that's an analytical standpoint, I'm pretty sure fans wouldn't care that Squidward didn't bolt the door down. But they would care about if the episode referenced an episode well over a decade ago, so the consistencies or lack thereof are not weighted equal. With the great and creative transition, Squidward has a mental breakdown, and we see 2 distinct fish individuals place down a jellyfish costume. That would be all fine and well if it weren't for the next scene, where Squidward takes the jellyfishing costume, and of those who notice are the exact fish duo who just went into the bathroom. Like, what is it with all of these blatant inconsistencies?
Let the annual jellyfish mascot hunt begin!
Jellyfish mascot hunt?
Don't worry, Squidward, based off of the perspective you have, they aren't running after you, they're running for the person next to you. However, it is here where we have that said Squidward comeuppance from episodes like Snowball Effect and Idiot Box, where Squidward does indeed get back at all who has inconvenienced him, at best. However, it's a mixed feeling for me. This is great and all, but it comes at the expense at a middle that repeats itself. It has the structure of Squidward getting the comeuppance at the end, but also the structure of, let's show a whole bunch of scenes of Squidward's day being ruined. And I guess the blend is fine, but I'm indifferent. I do think the creativity shines through these chaotic scenes, but I can't help to think that it's at the detriment of other scenes, considering that each episode has a budget. Who knows? I'm not behind the scenes, so I'm not going to try to make any sweeping generalizations about the allocation of said budget, but with stronger writing, this could have been a very memorable episode, like My Leg or Feral Friends. The episode ends with Squidward fumigating the entire hotel and spending time alone in a mask. How topical. Overall, a pretty good episode. However, its flaws, the inconsistency, and such a boring middle section, it really does drag it down a bit. The characterization and animation is top notch though. This leads us into It's Pony. I've covered it a while ago, stating that the first episode wasn't promising, and it kind of led us on a path where we'd not only get super predictable episodes, but also uninteresting scenarios. However, from my binge watching of It's Pony, I take a lot of my speculations back. I was wrong about my initial impression of It's Pony. While I still do believe that unfortunately the show is not going to live on for the amount of seasons that it deserves personally, thus being booted to Nicktoons, it isn't a bad show, and to show that, I want to talk about this episode, Bad Chicken. Don't adjust your screens, this is It's Pony. It starts out with this giant robot horse fight between Hero Horse and Wild Sterillion, the good guy and bad guy respectively. This will come into play later. Unlike SpongeBob, the mood here is calm with a very laid-back approach to storytelling. Despite Pony being labeled as chaotic because the ceiling has been raised and will continue to be raised when it comes to chaos, he'd only be labeled chaotic if you haven't watched like 3/4 of all popular animation. In short, he's only chaotic in a relative sense. However, I don't believe that this takes away from the show, and in fact, I'd end up finding something within the show that I enjoy, something that I don't see in many other shows on Nickelodeon and in general. As I suspected, they did keep the destructive nature of Pony consistent in episodes. However, in this episode, they do make sure that while Pony's carelessness and reckless nature is apparent, it doesn't interfere in the perception of Annie. I'd imagine people who watch this to not question Annie's motives in keeping Pony, and that's why the laid-back approach is so crucial here. Pony rips off a bike mirror because of lack of social cues and describes himself as a hero. Albeit cliche, I do think the aspect works here for what little happens within the episode, although I am confused on why bikers were ready for a confrontation that didn't need to happen with children. I can at least see, at the very least, that Pony didn't make that unjustified. In fact, his face kind of looks similar. Isn't that the guy from the other episode that I reviewed? Yeah, he was the guy where in the first few scenes, Pony trapped his dog in a foldable chair and the pressure shot the dog into the sky, which led them to run away from the biker's dudes in the first place. Jeez, Pony is not really the best person to that biker dude. You can also see during these scenes where Annie and Pony are hiding the sheer contrast in reactions to this situation. Pony is very unaware of what he did, and Annie's concerned expression tells it all. However, this leads into them meeting a chicken that's in a dumpster.
Oh, poor little scraggly thing. I wonder where she's from.
The streets. Oh, before that, an egg.
The focal point of this episode is Fowl, W-L, not fouls and O-U-L. Like someone who's brought home a stray kitten or puppy to their already occupied home, there's never 100% guarantee that the other pets in the home will accommodate the new blood. In fact, the chickens Annie's parents keep are not receptive to Straggly. The episode establishes early on that this chicken gets pushed around by everyone and isn't too confident in their self to stand up and fight back. I think compared to SpongeBob, Ollie's pack, and the Casa Grandes, what It's Ponies offers to me that's unique is, unlike SpongeBob, the laid-back nature of the show lends itself to being easier to watch, and it leaves for less room for error. Like for example, making people unlikable or making things harder to watch due to the exaggerated nature of everything, like what we saw in the previous episode, Jolly Lodgers. However, laid-back shows aren't foolproof, as they can become boring, leaving the viewer little justification to invest more time into it. Unlike Ollie's pack, I'm actually interested in this dynamic. I find this dynamic to be straightforward but practical in episodic storytelling situations. You have the voice of reason and Pony. Unlike the Casa Grandes, I actually have a big interest in the stories that they tell because it isn't moral based or based on a formula in which once you know of it, it makes the episodes later on predictable. Here's a unique offering of It's Pony. It's simply the fact that you're getting what's on the tin, a relatively chaotic pony and his best friend Annie going on adventures throughout the beautifully crafted city. So, does this episode keep up on the offer, like for example trying to integrate a chicken into their house?
Haha, yeah! Of course, sports are great for confidence. Watch and learn, Scraggle. Over to Pony. Oh, sorry, little dude.
Oh, Scraggle! Maybe someone else can help.
How catching a basketball was going to help Scraggly's confidence is beyond me. Annie does make the effort going around to different friends and trying to see if any of them can instill confidence in the chicken. For what it's worth, it does cement Annie's character as caring, as even her own mother was pretty quick to establish that the line is, if Annie runs out of ideas, they can't keep the chicken, and Scraggly won't even survive the night, let alone a week. We get to one of my favorite parts. Not only does it subvert expectation, but the way things kept ramping up was a great change of pace. I enjoy how everyone was supporting of Scraggly to pull the rug from the viewer, and I also wonder if Scraggly appearing through the curtain was sort of required, not from the creators, but the network to show that the chicken isn't dead, because that totally still can exist nowadays when it comes to cartoons. So where their friends couldn't help them in basketball or on stage, we have those who are more confident behind the scenes, or should I say, behind the screen.
I started a new game for you, Scraggle.
Give it a try, Scraggle.
And with these, I'd like to say they go by really quick, say what they need to say, and move on. It's a very humbling experience, especially when compared to other Nickelodeon shows like Ollie's Pack that seems to stretch out scenes to involve extra dialogue, usually snark. It's a clear, straightforward progression, and in some ways, the storytelling structure is reminiscent of King of the Hill, in the sense that it's telling a good upfront story rather than trying to bait and switch or overload it with comedy to the point where it looks like they're trying to hide a story. The episode also makes it apparent to censor in on Scraggly's ever so shaking face, showing that broken confidence has affected him deeply. As I may have said before, either here or in the other review, I've always been worried about the dynamic set up for these two based off of plants, because in that episode, we see Pony and Annie get into trouble exclusively of Pony's doing. And that kind of happens here, and it makes things seem like Pony was going to cause chaos at Annie's expense due to association. And why that worried me is because Annie's a very promising character. It's early in the show, but I can see her being a calm, humbling, but admirable character. Maybe even a role model, which Nickelodeon, if you really think about it, that's quite rare. Everyone from SpongeBob, Danny Phantom, Bessie, Timmy Turner, Jimmy Neutron, Aang, a lot of these main characters are naturally hyperactive, or not humbled at all. Sure, there's also characters like Doug or Arnold, but those aren't really that common. I believe the last one we had was Harvey Beaks. So to have a really good but chill character be ruined because of Pony's unlikability via carelessness would be unfortunate to the show's long-term growth. In this episode, Annie calls out Pony for being very silly, not getting the lines of the robotic horse right that he admires so much. So Scraggly drops the toy due to having to use their beak to press the button, and thus picks up the wrong one.
I will take over the world! I will take over the world! Revenge will be mine! I will take over the world! Take over the world!
So then we get the Day of Reckoning from Scraggle, leaving a mark aside all of the people or animals that hurt them. The chickens were stuffed in the cabinet, the basketballs were deflated, the main role was scooped up to gather all of the attention, and the video game started for Scraggle ended up in this guy's place being ruined. All with the same logo, to show that a consistent force has been the brains behind this. Like with the introduction of these scenarios, the scenes that show the tables being turned are also quick, to the point, and funny, especially the acting one. There's just something about him acting to drink poison and die, it's just so great, dubbed with chicken noises. So Annie thinks to herself, who else would Scraggly have a grudge on?
Who else would she have a grudge against? The comic book store.
She might hurt Hero Horse. I mean, Brian. Poor Brian.
Do this more. Keep this in every episode. So now we get to the big confrontation, all of which goes full circle. Now this episode isn't perfect by any means, and we kind of see so at the end. The episode makes it clear when Scraggly converts that the hero horse that Pony got in the beginning was destroyed. And he even states here that all of the hero horse action figures were destroyed. Apparently that doesn't matter because Pony has another one. Okay, I guess there was one hero horse that Scraggly missed, but I do find that to be pretty sloppy. However, the fight is awesome. It's composed of Pony saying a whole bunch of cliche good guy lines. And again, it's awesome. Also, if I haven't said it earlier, the art style of Hero Horse and Wild Cerulean when in their fictionally animated show, it's top tier. However, to end this great episode, they unbrainwashed the chicken, and it actually belongs to the bikers of all people. Surprise, surprise, I guess. And a sort of bookend ending. Not a strong ending, but it's not gonna put a damper on my opinion of the show. I enjoyed the show a lot, and if you want a heartwarming, wholesome experience, It's Pony is a show for you. Next stop, Ollie's Pack, a cartoon revolving around Ollie and his friends helping him protect the multiverse backpack full of monsters, and being trained along the way. I've covered this possibly in the only review done by a bigger YouTuber. I mean, sheesh, when you look up Ollie's Pack on YouTube, I should not be the second result. My main criticisms were that I didn't feel like the main character was that engaging, or that the show was really that entertaining beyond telling a solid story. I felt like while the main character, Ollie, had a lot of attributes that I enjoy in other snarky characters such as Gumball, Bugs Bunny, and Gary from Final Space, he wasn't that funny personally, which meant that a lot of his jokes fell flat, and his attitude made things unbearable. So the episode that spoke most to me was a test of his abilities as Keeper of the Pack, Major Snooch. The episode starts out with them tongue surfing a Pokemon, save this for later. It's very important in episodes, especially episodic ones, to be very on point with dialogue. You want your communication to be clear for anyone to understand, especially those who may be watching from a casual or new perspective. As such, we get to one of my major issues with Ollie's Pack.
Another amazing free-for-all Friday, huh guys?
Absolutely. TGIF. FFAF.
For me, today is CAFF. Complex Anagram Friday forever.
Oh, yeah, I knew that.
You didn't know that, and that's okay because I bet my bottom bamboo that a lot of people didn't know that either. The show seems so self-contained with its own comedy and dialogue, so confident early on that onlookers will be able to absorb their type of comedy and dialogue that it actually may end up alienating a lot of people who either find the show to be not their type or just okay, but not enough to invest in. They make a lot of jokes like this where you're supposed to understand the esoteric and weird, sometimes non-sequitur type of comedy, and to be fair, I like that comedy sometimes. This video about a dodgeball sound, and that's the entirety of the video, comedy gold.
Comedy gold.
But it wouldn't make a show about the weirdest parts of my humors for others to understand, personally. Not saying that there aren't successful shows that do this concept. So the pack starts to light up with alarming noises, and out pops out Major Snooch, one of the officials that oversee not only the pack and the Keeper of the Pack, but the person in charge of teaching the Keeper of the Pack how to control everything and anything that comes out of it. For what it's worth, I do enjoy the design of this character in the same way that I, for the most part, did with the Chosen Ones, the other episode I reviewed. I think it strikes the perfect balance between adorable, but also authoritative, and that's awesome.
This is my old roommate from school. Or in your language, Snooch.
Sorry, that's Major Snooch now, actually.
Right, cool, the fresh uni, super tight.
Tight indeed. It fits my body to the appropriate specifications.
I also just think her reserved and straightforward personality bounces off well with Captain Wowski's free-spirited nature, and thus gives her history of being college roommates not only weight, but intrigue. The episode tries another joke naming Major Snooch Snorch, and it falls flat. As much as I think the dialogue and jokes are hit or miss, I'm certain about one thing. The background design doesn't really move me. Now, hear me out. I know it seems like a very minor point to lay into the backgrounds, and it could seem nitpicky when you hold them within a vacuum. However, let me discuss the other shows that come from Nickelodeon. SpongeBob, although a great budget, their backgrounds are anything from good to iconic, and you really hear anyone turning away from SpongeBob nowadays because the backgrounds and the backdrop of the episodes feel stale after 20 years. Heck, some people would pay to go to a life-size replica of SpongeBob's house. Rise of the TMNT TNT, beautiful backgrounds of the city. I love the colors. Glitch text, some of the best background design that I've seen since Spider-Verse. The Loud House in Casa Grandes, love the art style and love the backgrounds a lot. It's Pony, surprisingly, as I said before, I ended up falling in love with these the most. Ollie's pack, generic really, nothing too crazy about it. So on our network where I love a lot of the worlds created to accompany these stories told in it, Ollie's pack is just meh.
I see a chosen one, his guardian, but why exactly are you two here?
Yeah, mostly just crack jokes.
I'm the voice of reason.
From what I've watched, the dynamic is functional. Bernie, as much of a goofball as he is, can really shed a light on Ollie's morality, like in the episode I covered prior. Cleo, while she does crack jokes, and quite more than a few of them do not land, she also offers a voice of reason, like Bernie, just in her own way. So now we get to the meat of this episode. She's here to evaluate Ollie and the training done by Captain Wowski. And she finds exactly what you think, a messy kid in a messy room with a messy diet and very little training despite the level of confidence. In that sense, Snooch is not only justified in being horrified by certain decisions, but also disappointed in Wowski's performance. However, Wowski makes a great point that I don't want to overlook. I hope this isn't breaking news to anyone, but Ollie is a kid, and kids are messy. Kids like pizza. Kids don't clean their room. Kids generally don't take things too seriously. I think both perspectives are perfectly valid and interesting ways to look at Ollie and his contributions to the pack so far. Let's see where the episode takes it. After getting fed up over all of the things done wrong to help Ollie, Snooch talks to Wowski privately. And by privately, I mean literally in front of the doorway. In fact, according to the scenes during this upcoming dialogue, we see that they can perfectly hear everything, which takes away the purpose of going into the hallway. But whatever. Take it away, Major Snooch. How do you feel about Ollie and his training so far?
He's a disaster, and it's all your fault, Wowski.
Hey, easy on the blame game, pal. It's a total drag. Ollie's great!
He's inept, and you're doing nothing to help him.
Wowski defends himself by saying that Ollie is an eagle, and if you cage an eagle, that eagle will be cranky. I know it's one of the Nickisms where the character has no idea what they're saying, but almost always there's a point to it or else you wouldn't write it down and let the voice actors perform it. But the point is, Ollie is a free spirit, and rulebooks and guidelines don't fly with him. As a person who couldn't care less for rules and guidelines and turn out to be pretty decent, I can relate. With Major Snooch not getting through to Wowski, she drops a bomb. He may lose his gig here. So of course, in episodic fashion, we have the character do a 180 and become something that they're not. To teach someone who isn't going to be taught that way, something that I can honestly say I can't seem to care about all that much. If anything, Wowski seems more driven to keep his job than to teach Ollie how to be a successful keeper of the pack. There's a montage that is supposed to show how Ollie has been struggling with the new intense training and thus falters. However, when you consider that Wowski is trying to cram years of intended training into a week, and Ollie isn't up for it anymore.
But it's not working. This training manual garbage is not your style. It's not mine, and you know it.
I have to try, Ollie.
Or what?
Or he'll be fired. By me.
Totally could have called that last part.
You're not gonna catch me bad-mouthing Ollie in this review, as much as some people see Ollie as this lazy, entitled, free-spirited for nothing slacker, or a millennial? Why do I keep saying millennial? I can't even say the word! Or a millennial, whichever word of the day people want to use. Ollie is a 13-year-old kid who goes through school and doesn't see the need to impress some uniform-wearing grouch. And you have to see from his perspective that none of this should be that important. And once again, Wowski is really doing this for job security, as he also doesn't see any of this to be important. The story so far has been showing that the pack doesn't matter. The backpack can be worn by anyone in any character, and they can have decent success with it. Cleo, Bernie, if they both had the pack, they do roughly the same amount of entertainment with it. Whereas the initial episode I reviewed built up that the pack is highly valuable, this episode shows the 1 step forward, 3 steps back mistake of showing that not only is Ollie an ordinary kid, he's just one of many kids who can use the pack. As I said, Bernie can be the keeper, Cleo can be the keeper. Are you around the age of these people? You can be the keeper. In fact, even if you aren't of the age of the people in this episode, maybe when you were, or maybe when you will be, you can be the keeper. Every everyone can be keepers. Now, I'm sure the 17 Ollie's Pack fans out there can point to episode A and B and C and tell me about how only Ollie can do what he can do, but at this point, do you think episodes burying the pack and making it seem like something that isn't really that important is necessary? Imagine a Ben 10 episode in season 1 that shows that anyone can wear the Omnitrix. In fact, I'm pretty sure they explored this with Gwen and they showed that this is for Ben.
Are you prepared for your test?
No.
He said North, which of course means yes in Globian, which he's learned completely.
Good. Monster Languages, Chapter 5B. I like your tie, Wowski.
Oh, thank you. It's like a belt for my neck.
This here really encapsulates my entire feelings towards this episode. Ollie couldn't care less for this test, which is perfectly natural for 13-year-olds, but at the same time, I'm supposed to care about his journey. I'm supposed to sit here and be excited for the journey of a kid who couldn't care about the one thing that helps him stand out between his friends. I'm sorry, but I've not only seen other main characters who have had heart but honestly flail around and do almost nothing done better before, but I've seen all of that done before better on your own network, including Garfield and June from Wonder Park. This one is the least engaging, and I think that's my main problem with this show. While I understand his lack of enthusiasm for the pack in these episodes, it doesn't make me want to sit down and watch more episodes involving him. If he wants to goof off, that's great, kids should have fun. But this isn't fun. The potential of a cool show about an unpredictable backpack is fun. Episodes like this do the opposite of what's intended, and it is for that reason that I believe if we were talking realistically here, with the show's logic, Ollie would not pass this test. For episode's sake he does, but it's incredibly forced given the way that the story turned out. I don't believe that he's a strong main character. I don't believe he's engaging enough for the spin that he has. I also don't think the action here is great enough to warrant him acting that way. Everything is so low-key and laid back that nothing stands out as interesting. It's all mush. It's the type of show that you would half watch between SpongeBob and whatever comes after Henry Danger. Ollie and his friends recapture the monsters that he accidentally released and also use that tongue surfing from before. Considering this is from Teletoon, I was almost about to say that this seems straight out of Almost Naked Animals in the way that this was presented. Anyone who has watched my channel knows that I rarely use words like this, but I physically cringed in real life when I saw how they tried to spin Ollie's failure into a cool thing.
You gotta know that Ollie is a great chosen one. He just doesn't vibe with rules and structure, so I've been teaching him in a way that reflects his personality. And if that doesn't work for you, well, then fine.
Enough! That was, without a doubt, the coolest thing I've ever done!
Every time I see this, I feel secondhand embarrassment. It feels so generic, just generic kid show aesthetic, to have the stuffy one just out of the blue enjoy everything and understand and empathize with everything. You want to know how this would go if this was actually accurate to the story that they were telling? Ollie would have messed everything up. Wowski would buckle under the pressure and they'd fail, obviously. I don't like how this episode is trying to push this random chemistry that they have when things get serious and they apparently just get going. It's like worse than the most mediocre Teen Titans Go episodes. Ollie is still pretty terrible at being a keeper of the pack, and Wowski didn't train him to the standard that he should be at. But because this is main character in a cartoon, he's pushed along like those sloppy TV dinners that never come out in the way that you expect. We have a little bit of this, a little bit of that, you got yourself a dinner. But really, it's an inferior subsection of dinner. In the same way that Ollie's Pack has a lot on paper that looks great about it, but it's never gonna grasp me with episodes like this. Overall, I'd always suggest trying something once or twice when it comes to animation, but with Ollie's Pack, even if it doesn't hook you in the second time, I really don't blame you. And as I said on Twitter, continue to sleep on it. Finally, for the main event, and the one that I'm most excited to talk about, the Casa Grandes. I've spoken about this show once in the past, and my conclusion was essentially, it came down to the fact that the show is primarily inoffensive and safe, and thus will probably cast a wide net like the Loud House, and gain a lot of fans due to the character dynamics and structure and calculated plots that they chose. However, due to the fact that the Casa Grandes is built off of the same writing foundation and philosophy as the Loud House, at most you're going to move fans between shows and not gain that many, if any, new fans of the Casa Grandes who didn't like the Loud House. I don't want to beat around the bush, but my opinion has largely remained the same. This show is pretty much the Loud House, but with different characters. The dynamics are largely the same, the plots are predictable, and more importantly, the show is accomplishing the exact same thing as the Loud House, just with a different crew of characters. Now, I chose VIP only because of the fact that unlike SpongeBob or It's Pony or Ollie's Pack, the Casa Grandes is so heavily story and moral driven that the choices of the main character determines the quality of said episode. Remember when I covered Potty Mouth in that Versus a while back? The dilemma and core part of the quality of the episode revolved around the way that they handled the moral of Lily cursing, quote unquote. A good episode would have the character act in a way that seems believable for their story and moral, and a bad episode would do the opposite. In this episode, it starts out hinting at said dilemma when Carlota wants to make a makeup vlog inspired by the in-universe pop star Alyssa Barella, and her family gets in the way. It kind of reminds me of that other show and their hyperactive family.
Guys, I am vlogging live. People are watching this right now.
What people? Your 2 followers?
Okay, Lucha Loser, show me your channel. You probably have one of those 3D text spinning in a random space over a 2010's Trap Nation MP3 rip. However, of those few followers, one of those were said in-universe pop star Alyssa Barella, who not only enjoys the video, but she also wants Carlota to do her makeup. It's a wonderful opportunity, but she has to think about what her family's going to do. Clearly, they'll mess up the opportunity and give her the reputation that she could be hard to work with. So clearly the episode is setting up tension between Carlota becoming known for her makeup work and her love and patience with her rowdy family, which if you've seen any moral driven show, you already have seen this episode multiple times before, and you're gonna know that Carlota is going to pick, at the end of the day, her family. Surely some may still be entertained to watch if the jokes are funny or if the plot has different twists and turns that keep you engaged, and it does. You see, the Casa Grandes took an online class of the Butch Hartman School of And Then the Opposite Happens, and decided to show their brand of humor when Carlota tries to ease her family out of following her to her first major gig.
Yeah. I so wish you guys could come, but the show's been sold out for months. Bummer.
Whoa, Elisa just sent you 10 free tickets!
Now, since this is a popular show and not a 10th season trying to salvage what little integrity it had left, that's not the only type of jokes told within the show ever so blatantly and essential to the plot. There's also just a lot of dialogue humor, some of which I don't find to be that bad.
Remember when I used to sneak out and go to concerts?
What? You're grounded, young lady.
I don't know why, but the thought of everyone, including the person that she whispered to, going ooh is hilarious. So, like in Jolly Lodgers, a large majority of this episode is spent with the obvious happening over and over and over and over. However, to give the Casa Grandes a lot more leeway, different characters are essentially doing the same thing. Whereas in SpongeBob, the joke was the same, SpongeBob messing with Squidward. Here is a different family member getting in the way of Carlota's big break, and I guess in the grand scheme of the episode, it's not that bad. However, there are things in this episode that make me scratch my head.
You are embarrassing me! Okay, fine. Just get some snacks and take them back to your seats.
Alisa, coming through!
Rosa, or Abuela for Carlota, at first is okay with the food, but then replaces the food. This is something I notice a lot within the animation, where a character is acting the same as a mob, but actually has a differing perspective one center in on that directly contradicts their mob mentality. I know everyone kind of needs their moment to shine, and this would seem like a great way to do so, but it's inconsistent. Beyond that, I don't find the interactions between Carlota and her family to be too bad, but they're not great. It just seems like more run-of-the-mill stuff that, unless you are already a big fan of, just seems middling. Granted, Alisa is a very good sport about the constant interruptions and doesn't come across as a pop diva, as this trope generally goes, and I think that's the saving grace of this episode. Now, although I could run through individually what each family member does, all you need to know is that it exemplifies their specific personality trait and distracts Carlota from her dream gig. Now, to give this show some more praise, I love the shot when her family overwhelms Alyssa, giving this very heavy-sided shot of the family taking up 3/4 of the frame with Alyssa taking up the bottom corner, showing the overwhelming nature of the family. Fed up with their folks, Carlota has a plan.
My family is kind of distracting me. Could you, take them on a backstage tour until showtime?
I see. It's not like I'm busy assisting a huge pop star or anything.
I'll give you a free aloe facial.
The tour bus does dry on my skin.
So this is where your suspension of disbelief is put to the test. After the first half of this episode shows you that the Casagrandes are a wild bunch to wrangle together and that they cannot sit down for a second, the show presents Carlota with a challenge. Upon finishing Elisa's makeup, Elisa's assistant tells Carlota that he lost her family. Not that it's hard to do so when you don't have your eye on them, but granted, this time, they were chasing their youngest one that went into apparently a door that locks from the inside. With this new information, Carlota has a choice. She can either spend 5 minutes interviewing Elisa and then find her family, or find her family and drop the 5-minute interview that she's been longing for. Now, for a moral-driven show, I understand why she wants to drop the 5-minute interview. You want Carlota to be seen as someone who loves her family, and obviously at the end of the day, they'll give their obligatory sorry for being too much, but we're gonna do it again because it's a status quo speech. But a whole 10-group family getting lost within a minute when the sacrifice is 5 minutes is not compelling. You're telling me that in a huge stadium full of different people and a concert going on, that the big sacrifice is 5 minutes? 5 minutes? Okay, what a great sacrifice to show that she loves her family. But Jay, the true sacrifice is she's turning down Alyssa for her family, and Alyssa's her idol. That would make the vlog go viral. Sure, she's totally turning down her experiences with Alyssa, and if you don't count the fact that she's already been doing her makeup, she already did the blog which increased in viewer count. They showed that on the episode. And later on, they do a show together. Once again, a moral-driven show can have bad episodes because the moral is either forced, doesn't make sense, or is incredibly tedious to get through because the moral comes at the expense of surprises and sometimes entertaining storytelling. Also, she said she didn't want to get rid of her family, but she did want to get rid of her family, just temporarily.
I love you guys, and I'm sorry I was ever embarrassed by you. I should be embarrassed for myself.
Oh, you will be!
You should feel embarrassed. If we're going to put morals in a kid's show, telling children to suppress their feelings and emotions when their family is sabotaging their career/hobbyist opportunities, especially those as rare as doing makeup for a famous star, that's not a good message to send. You can love your family and you can be assertive enough for them to respect your work. Those things are not mutually exclusive, and wanting your family to leave you be for 25 minutes, the 20 minutes for makeup plus the sacred 5-minute interview is not a big ask, and a family that can't do that is hindering, considering that no actual job would be composed of less than 25 minutes of work. They try to soften the blow with Alyssa showing her family in the front row, but these are not equivalent situations. Alyssa's family is in a designated area to be when Alyssa is working. When Carlota was working, they were in her face, doing things that may have led her to be a liability if she ignored them. I'm sure if Alyssa's family was backstage messing with her, she'd also want them gone. It has nothing to do with love, it has to do with respect. So no, I reject the moral here, and I think it's poorly written, and it tries to lean on the family good, safe narrative, even when it can take the opportunity to explain how intention doesn't always equal a result, which can actually benefit children to learn early on, but who cares about that? Just throw a sing-along song at the end and call it a day, right?
When I was down, you picked me up, you helped me out. When I was stuck, sometimes we fight. We have trials and tribulations.
To me, I understand that on the surface level, it looks like I'm going against family, but I'm honestly not. I wouldn't want Carlota to do that, nor would I think it's a good idea for Nickelodeon to promote that. But the way this episode is written, people like Carlota gets the raw end of the deal, and real life doesn't work that way. And I don't like doing moralization arguments. That's why I cover Gumball and SpongeBob and Fairly OddParents. Shows that are not morally driven. Shows that generally want to make you laugh, and that's it. You can't argue that the Casa Grandes doesn't want to teach lessons, because they clearly do with their episode structure, and how each character is given a vanilla lesson to learn. That's why I started out speaking about how a bad Casagrandes episode can just be one where the moral doesn't work out for the situation. Morals aren't always a catch-all answer to things. In fact, I'll take Gumball, it's a great example of this. Shocker. The Sock was an episode all about honesty and how the line is very blurred, because if you're too honest like Gumball was, you could be seen as rude given opinions that aren't necessary, but honest. But if you hold things in, you can be seen as deceptive or being disingenuous. The episode treats the problem as a blurry issue that depends on people and the context of the conversation. If the Casagrandes or the Loud House would handle it, I feel like they would try to make the answer easier because they're speaking to a younger audience, but also mislead them into thinking that these situations are easy, and that may end up doing more harm than good in the long run. This episode was decent and inoffensive for the most part, but the moral falls flat on its face. And that should do it for this Mega Versus because overall I think Nickelodeon has 3 pretty good shows and 1 show that I wouldn't recommend to my worst enemy. I'd totally do this for Cartoon Network, but that would probably be 14 hours long because they have a whole bunch of stuff on their platform. But until then, let me know which shows you like of these 4 in the comment section down below. Make sure to join the Panda Armada today by going to alphaj.show/panda. Special thanks to the supporters of July, and until next time, take care. Alpha out.